Hello, welcome to Soni Irabor Live. Tonight, we have a master of the game, as you would say, because he's been very involved since in his 20s. I mean, being a manager of men and resources, and also, apart from that, he now dabbled into politics over time, over the years, and the truth is, he's a professor of political economy and a management expert. The little I know of him, and I know quite a lot actually, is that he was actually one-time special advisor to President Shehu Shagari, and we're talking of in the 80s, and he was in his 20s. And then, of course, he also became the deputy managing director of Volkswagen of Nigeria. So, you see, when you talk about men of management, men of timber caliber, I didn't want to use that phrase before, but men of resources who really understand how to manage men and resources, then maybe you want to think of Professor Pat Utomi. He's my guest, and we're trying to link up with him. And very shortly, we will be with him, and then we'll discuss some more. But tonight, we're looking at Lagos election for 1 year, but Nigeria in totality, state of the nation. You know, the coalition parties, as far as politics is concerned, vis-a-vis their competition with APC, the ruling party. And of course, you know that by 2027, there's a lot of hue and cry about 2027 already. We're not even up to, maybe we're about halfway into the first term of the current government. So what are we looking at? We're looking at the fact that the country is moving, boiling, and trying to validate itself, cope with the economy, a lot of inflation here and there, and also the youth empowerment. How are we doing it? What are the good things the government has done so far, and what are the so-called bad things? I say so-called, but maybe I should say alleged bad things the government has done. So where we decided to pick somebody like Professor Pat Utomi, just with a view to understanding what it takes. He was also once a presidential candidate, and I think this was about 2015 or 2019 election. And so maybe he has some experience that we can leverage on. We can seek his opinion and also talk about how to manage youth, their expectations. We remember in 2020, that was a remarkable year for Nigeria and for the rest of the world because of COVID-19. But we also remembered that that was the period where we had EndSARS, and where the youths really gathered together and expressed their disdain for the kind of leadership then that it was. And then in 2023, there was a movement by the youth that was like a sea of heads, where we saw, children, youth, young people, and those young at heart, sea of heads all over the country, moving every which way. What were they after? Good leadership. Praying for a very good, people-friendly leadership. Today, we now say they have won. No, they didn't, because we have a new government, but they are still crying. So what does anybody who's a political analyst have to say about the role of the youth in politics, role of the youth in leadership, and so on and so forth? But anyway, let me stop my monologue, and while we try to link with Professor Pat Utomi, we'll be right back after the beginning break.
Everywhere across Nigeria, with news coverage driven by the quest for solutions, News Central brings you the stories that matter.
Bringing you major headlines and latest developments from the creeks of the Niger Delta, South Nigeria. I am Austin.
Live from the Federal Capital Territory, I am Joshua Imarai, bringing you exclusive insights and updates straight from Abuja.
Covering the rich cultural heritage and dynamic events of the North, I am Emmanuel Bagudu.
Covering the ongoing developments and triumphs of the Northeast, I am Umaru Kirawa, live from Borno.
Bringing you stories of growth and resilience from the Southeast. I am Chinwe Ukele.
In the intensity of Nigeria's middle belt, I am Chizoba Anyowe, bringing you stories of diversity and latest happenings from Jos.
With a dedicated team of reporters across the nation, News Central is empowering viewers to shape the future of their communities. Because your story is our mission. Stay informed, stay connected with News Central, with fearless reporting on what matters most.
Yes, welcome back. Well, I'm glad to announce that Professor Pat Utomi is with me, and we have a lot to discuss, as I told you at the beginning, and here we are. Professor, you're very welcome to Soni Irabor Live. Welcome again and again and again. We've had this so many times before, you know that.
Great pleasure.
How are you?
Such a pleasure to be able to join.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Prof, let's look at, Lagos election today. I have said to you that I would like you to just look at the overview of the local government elections, and Lagos had its own today, which finished at 3 p.m. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I made an effort to talk with a number of people that I know. It would seem that I either know the wrong people or none of the people I know paid any attention to the process, which was, in a way, it was tragic, but it seems to be how democracy has come down.
When you say tragic, what do you mean?
A couple of reasons.
You said tragic.
A low level of interest. I think if there's an honest indication of registered voters who turned out, I will bet you it was less than 3%. I will bet you. I've seen no numbers. I have no authority on what I'm saying. But at least nobody I know went to vote. Nobody I know knew who was running, even though there are posters on the streets. But somehow there's been a certain deadening of interest in citizens that is dangerous for democracy for a variety of reasons, beginning with the tradition of local government elections in the country. It's been taken for granted the local government elections are just opportunities for those in charge in those states to just shoo in whoever they want to shoo in. And yet local governments are perhaps the most important level of government, in my opinion, because they are the ones that are closest to the people. That's where you can make the choices that affect your children's education if the Constitution ran right. That's where you can make the choices that affect your security if the Constitution was a proper, good running one. But we have an obtuse constitution, and that's why it should be interesting to see what comes out of the Patriots meeting in Abuja next week. Really, truly, from my experience in some parts of the world, people are more concerned with their local governments than they are about national elections. Look, if we had a security arrangement in our country in which the base of the security apparatus was the community, the local government, as I like to remind people, when I lived, went to school in the United States in the 1970s, I lived in a college town, majorly college town. The university had its own police force, complete, armed, mobile, and all of that. You drive out of the university campus, you get into the city, and the city had its own police force. and you move out of the city into the county had its own sheriffs. But for some reason, security has been made the federal thing in Nigeria. And so the relevance of local governments as the primary source of the role of the leviathan in the protection of life and property is lost. And so that's one problem.
Yeah,
another level.
Okay, go on.
Things like education are best managed at the local government level. I mean, if you really want development, the kind of education at primary school level should reflect the economic endowments of that particular state or region, such that, I mean, let's take agricultural value chains. If Lagos was a place of fisheries, by the time a kid is in primary school in the 6th grade, he knows exactly how best to culture fish, process fish. By the time he's in secondary school, he knows a little more about the value chain. Same thing if you were in an agricultural state like, say, Benue, where you grow sesame seeds, and by the time the child is out of primary school, he knows what makes for the kind of yield per hectare of sesame seed that you might require.
From what you are saying now, Professor, from what you are saying now, it appears but this current government has given a strong recognition to local government position. The 3 tiers of government has now become more effective. They're even allowed to be paid directly, unlike before where there was intervention from state before they could get their money in local government. So wouldn't you say there's a step forward, so to speak?
Well, I hope so. But I think in Nigeria, we always begin with money. People are getting more money, and it's not about money. It starts with capacity. Yeah. You know, local governments in many of our states, most parts of Nigeria, many very, very well-educated and experienced people retire at 60 as CEO of some multinational company, as federal permanent secretary, as general in the army, as whatever. And they nicely go back to what they call their village and begin quasi-country life. Those are the kind of people with all their experience that should be your local government councillors. And one of them becomes chairman. And they develop a roadmap for converting that area. You know, in the United States, local governments are in deep competition with one another to attract investments. I've spoken frequently in the past about what they call TIFA funds. TIFA is Tax Incentive Finance Authority. Many local governments in the American Midwest, for example, will give a business bank guarantees, will even give them grants of a couple of $1 million if they project that that business establishing in that local government area, it will become an anchor tenant that will bring other businesses along, and within 10 years or so, the tax revenues for that local government will be multiples of what it is today. And so the local government invests literally by giving grants to that business coming. But I don't think local governments in our country get into competition with one another to attract investments, looking at their local factor endowments and all of those. These are the real problems that we need to deal with in local government reform to get the most out of local governments.
Do you see them representing the interests of the people based on your observations so far? Like the local governments now.
Which one?
The local governments.
These retired permanent secretaries or the people who are getting elected today?
The local governments, those in charge, as it were, do you see them representing the interests of the populace, the people?
As it is today, I mean, they are just places where powerful state officials plant their boys to go and do little small things. I don't see the local government as organized today. And I tell you very frankly, I was talking some years ago with the late Professor Akimabo Bunje about importance of local governments and what you can do. said to me, look, local governments are a joke. That if you take some parts of the country, like say the Southeast, the local association, village association, will serve you much better than the local government. You know, so that would be a better platform to use to develop than local government would be. So I think that a lot of work needs to be done to reorient us regarding the 3 tiers of government and the role that local government plays and the kind of quality of people who should go into local government and really make a difference.
Okay, it's been an interesting week, I must say, because we also had the coalition, many parties coming together to form one opposition party. You know, how do you see that?
Well, it's good for our democracy to mature by getting politicians to, you know, work together to build broader bases. That way they can have better muscle to challenge. But very importantly, I think beyond being machines for winning elections, I think that such coalitions need to deepen the role of political parties in ensuring governance that serves the interest of the people. So it's a good thing. I think we should watch and see how it develops.
But they don't seem to be in agreement with choosing a flag bearer, as it were. We have names like Peter Obi, Atiku Abubakar, and a lot of others. I think Kwakwanso was also mentioned. What do you say of these names, and how do you see them cooperating to form a flag bearer, to get a flag bearer?
I think we're jumping the gun too much. They've just said they want to work together, and we're talking about flag bearer.
Okay.
And that's the problem with Nigerian politics. We just go from one election to another election and talk about flag bearer and cult of personalities, and we don't talk about the nitty-gritty of how to organize a party so that it can produce a party plank, so that it can produce a clear set of values that will drive engaging in that party. That is why people wake up one morning, they're in one party, the next day they're in another party, the next day they're in another party. We should make the parties represent something. And that thing which they represent will be what moves them forward to making a difference in how the country runs.
So what do you advise? What values are you looking at?
Advise that it should, well, first of all, ethics. We all know Nigeria is drowning from corruption. I mean, look, we're just talking about NNPC announcing that the refineries that have come to North and that, you know, all those billions were thrown away. They didn't need to come here to tell us that. I said so. When they were saying they were going to invest that money in refinery, I begged them. I said, give away the refineries for $1, 1 naira. The British government or whatever it is, they give away Jaguar, Rolls Royce for £1. No, we're going to fix it. And after billions of dollars were pumped into people's pockets, we wake up and say, they are not fixable. I said so long ago, I don't have any extraordinary engineering expertise. I just happen to be a manager and I know these things. We had the same problem with power. Oh, no, scrap, new system. Some people come back, no, we can fix the power plants. After billions of dollars, back to zilch. I don't know what makes us not think enough about our children when we make these decisions. Because the only thing that drives all those decisions is corruption. Corruption.
What you've mentioned, the issue of corruption and the fact that there's no accountability, that's my phrase now, it's very worrisome. I would ask you...
that's the reality. That's the reality.
It's the reality. How do we tackle it? How do we tackle it?
You see, democracy is almost about accountability. You see, those who represent you in a democracy are agents, your agents. And anywhere the agency function exists, the prime objective is holding your agents to account to you. But how many people who are elected in Nigeria feel they account to the Nigerian people? No, there's no accountability. The system lacks it. You even try to start something that will make them answer questions. They get very upset. Politics in Nigeria is very angry with the idea of accountability. Is it a surprise, therefore, that we've not made much progress compared to our peers? Look at our peers elsewhere in the world. Look at where they are. Look at where we are. What's the major difference? They account in other countries. In Nigeria, we don't account. We pretend to account, but there's no accountability here.
It's worrisome because if you look at accountability vis-a-vis what's happening at the National Assembly, it becomes even a bigger issue and a bigger question. What do you have to say about that?
Oh my goodness. I long ago began to pretend that we don't have a National Assembly. I'm not joking. This 10th Assembly has been a tragedy for the Nigerian people. It is beyond rubber stamp. The truth of the matter is that the people who are there don't think they represent anybody, is what they can get from the system. And small things like threatening to take you away from one committee or the other, and you will just immediately do a volte-face. So it has become just a tool in the hands of the executive to do what they like. Compare this to even as recently as the Namani or the Saraki Senate, compared to what we have today. You know, and you feel sorry for Nigeria. You really feel sorry for Nigeria.
So the whole talk about oversight function doesn't appear to come into play the way you are saying it now.
Come on. This is a joke. We all know the truth. I think I just saw a video of the clerk of the House, one of the clerks in the Assembly, telling the story of oversight. We know that these things are just opportunities for people to get as much cash from the system as they can. The business of governing has been lost, has been forgotten. It is how the people who are there can take care of themselves the most that is on the agenda. I'm sorry to say that. I would love that it were different, but what you can see is very clearly the opposite.
If they are not oversighting, and where lies the rule of law? I thought the whole thing was set up with the Constitution in play.
Well, let us pray that we can begin to discuss the Constitution afresh, because I guess as a recent column said, is the Constitution stupid? The Constitution is not working for the Nigerian people. No, it isn't. Look, I have tracked democracies around the world. Around the world today, democracies are significantly challenged. Emotion and reason are in struggle, even in the United States. But in a situation, we're dealing with a massive state capture. And, Socrates' fear for democracy has come fully alive here. Socrates worried when Plato wanted or thought the ideal type democracy was one in which philosopher kings, brilliant, wise men who had power, governed for the common good. But the danger was always, as Socrates now pointed to us, that in a democracy, thieves and bandits will demand function in government, and democracy will give it to them. And when that happens, we are in trouble. So what has happened is that in quite a number of democracies, we are sliding into what is a kakistocracy. A kakistocracy is a government by the worst. And many societies are struggling right now because they are kakistocracies, a slide down from the ideal type that Plato desired.
We'll take a short break right now, and when we come back, we'll look at some other issues regarding the youth ruling party and this issue of the rule of law. I'm going to bring it all back. We'll be right back after the break.
Emotions are high, People are angry, people are in tears. I notice.
All around me, there are people, many of them trying to salvage whatever they can salvage.
It's Ismaila Mohammed, who was shot by one of the officers of the Nigerian army. This is the hole where the bullet penetrated, and that's the second hole.
Right behind me are members of the Nigerian police force to alert the protesters that they've gone past their time.
They came out with reinforcement, basically. All right, at the moment, 2 roll on now. Aguenta.
Welcome back. This is Soni Irabor Live, and our guest tonight is Professor Pat Utomi, who is a political economist and a management expert. And we've looked at a few things regarding the local government election. We've also looked at the National Assembly and its role and its oversight function. Now we're going to be looking at one very important aspect, which is that we're just halfway into the first term of the current government, and there are campaign banners and noises and news being bandied around. So really, we have a lot at play and a lot of work to do, so to speak. So Professor Pat Utomi will join us very shortly, and then we'll ask him more questions, especially, again, looking at the journey from 2020 to date. The youths, how have they fared? But before we get to that, Professor, before we get to how the youths have fared, let me ask you, what do you think of the current campaign for 2027, which is just when the current is just mid-term of the first term?
Well, I think it is a shame. I think it's tragic. I think it shows what the problem is, the triumph of politics. Everything's about politics, about elections, and very little about governing. Look, that we are talking elections at this time, when we've not even been able to evaluate the season that we've entered, is very sad, very, very sad. Look at the British electoral cycle. Between when they call elections and the new government is in place, probably 3 months or something like that. Why do we spend so much time on politics and so little time governing? You can see the consequence in the numbers. Look, 75% of people who live in rural Nigeria today live in chronic poverty. Where is a strategy from political parties on this? Where is the critique of the incumbents performing on that very important factor, which is what stokes all of these violence everywhere, because people have nothing to lose. They don't have jobs. They don't have a vision of tomorrow that they're going to enjoy. And so they are available to be cannon fodder for anybody who can pay them a nickel or a dime. I think the politicians we need a national conference, of politicians.
But we've had many national conferences before. We've had many national conferences before. There was even the last one was in 2014.
I'm not talking about a national conference to discuss the future of the country. I mean to discuss with each other what they owe the Nigerian people, not, because really seriously, any deep-thinking person who is involved in political life should have their faces buried in shame for where Nigeria is compared to its peers. Really seriously, honestly, if we do a clear examination of conscience, people should be, and they're going around with a swag. I mean, look at poverty, the way it's looking us in the face, everywhere. Compare us to Egypt. Go around Cairo, see how many limousines, how many four-wheel drives, black parking four-wheel drives are running around with politicians in them. When you see a senior official there, you are lucky if he's in a Toyota Corolla. But here, glittering limousines all over the place. And yet we can't do the basic things that they are doing in Egypt so well. We can't provide power to our people. We can't provide schools for our people. We have the most number of out-of-school children in the world. We have everything in South. And our politicians are still celebrating themselves and going from one election cycle straight to the next.
Well,
what
Professor,
did we do wrong? How did we inherit this kind of...
Professor, you are in a system in a way. I feel your pain as you speak. But don't you have access to these people to talk to them and advise them? And don't they take your advice?
Are you kidding me? I have browbeaten face to face. At least everybody knows me that I don't pull punches with the truth. I've sat with heads of state, presidents. It is interesting that the president has been most receptive to ideas. Sadly, did not live long enough to try and truly be president. And that's Umaru Musa Yar'Adua. You know, unfortunately, we have this dominance of politics. Of course, you have people like President Obasanjo who are quite reflective of reality in the way they went about. Look, you remember back in the 70s when oil prices went down a notch, and President Obasanjo immediately went to low profile. 504 was the car the president drove around in. Today, things are 100 times worse than they were back then. Look at how our politicians are around. As if they don't give a damn about whether the people are suffering or dying. Compare Obasanjo as a young 30-something-year-old army officer. His reaction to resource availability and the plight of the people, and compare what we have today. You ask yourself, how did Nigeria go from there to here? How? How?
But this government talks about strategy, and apparently it comes with President Tinubu, who created a Ministry of Strategy, Information and Strategy in Lagos State those days. And I think he has a similar thing now in at the federal level. What is strategy compared to rulership and gaining results in the interest of the people?
You know, people who talk strategy often make a joke that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I tell you a story. One Friday morning, decades ago, I arrived in Houston and went into a bookstore. As was habitual, I go into a bookstore as soon as I land in any place where there is a real serious bookstore. And a book was just being unpacked. It was just about to be put on the shelves. It had a good title. I grabbed it. And it was a book by a guy called Peter Cohen. And he talked about essentially strategy and effectiveness. And the first page of the book was a statement of corporate purpose and strategy. And he said, and then he opened the next page, he said, if you liked this page, well, that was in the annual report, the last annual report of the Enron Corporation. A few weeks before that, the Enron Corporation had gone down for doing exactly the opposite of what was that in his strategy document. And that night on TV, Jeff Skilling, who ran Enron, was being interviewed. And he was asked the question, and he said, well, those are just optics. There are many times that people don't understand that strategy is not about optics. And so they talk a lot about strategy, and culture does not reflect the strategy. And we get the kind of Enron effect from that way of behaving in management. And I think that's probably what you are pointing to when you talk about strategy.
I'm looking at another issue of information management as well, because if you're actually looking at this whole problem, I must confess even I should say so, that there are certain, decisions and policies that this government has come out with that are appreciable and that I think are worthy of mention. Maybe one of them is the students' loan, the NEFON loan. Looks good if our youths are given a chance to be able to afford their level of education to the level that they will come out, tops, and everybody will be happy. But information management doesn't seem to be laying credence to that effort. What do you have to say?
I don't know if it's about information management. I mean, of course, there are good ideas here and there. The students' loan idea we've been talking about for years as an alternative to free education, where that does not provide enough resources for the system to run the universities or wherever. And so the idea of student loan is a good idea. But again, how you implement it makes a huge difference. Look, the problem today is that we run government by propaganda. So much effort is put into propaganda. And if the propaganda were civil, it would be nice. But it's, primitive kind of abusive propaganda. And so the state cannot be what the ultimate philosopher of the public sphere, Jürgen Habermas, talks about as the place of rational public conversation, where the marketplace of ideas leads to the optimum policy choice. Most people who really think are afraid of being involved in the discussion of any issue in public, because you have all these boys who have been paid to insult in social media. Once they see your name and they don't think you are a supporter of their whatever group they represent, they begin to abuse. They don't even understand what you are saying. They will be abusing you. That's how we've reduced our politics. Politics should really be about ideas, issues. But the people who are engaged in public communication, as you call it, don't even understand what the issues are. So how do you go forward from that? We've got a real crisis, and God will have to help us.
Okay, at this point, I bring you the youth. We talked about NSAS, and then there was the obedient movement. The youth feel disenfranchised. They believe they ought to, by now, be very involved, squarely involved in, in politics and in the rule of law and in the way, relationship between leadership and followership is managed. Do you have anything to say about the youth?
No, I think they are right. I think that this generation has bullied young people, especially because they got into positions of authority early in their own lives, but they have been unfair to young people. If you recall, I was editor of one of the biggest news magazines in this country at 22 or thereabouts. The days of Chris Okolie and New Breed magazine.
New Breed.
I was a presidential advisory position at 27. I didn't just get appointed because I knew somebody who knew somebody. People have to understand. The young people say, he was there at this age. Yes, but I had three graduate degrees, 2 master's degrees, and a PhD at 26. So if people prepare themselves, they should be given roles commensurate with their preparation. And I don't think that we're giving young people the appropriate opportunity. Everything is a game, is a connection, is who you know. When I was appointed to that position, I had no godfather. In fact, my father had even passed. I'll talk of godfather, But I just wrote a few things. I talked about tax policy, or I wrote about tax policy. My friend Rick, who was editor of Sunday Times, and I wrote a series on tax policy. And somebody from the office of the vice president made a note of that. In fact, one of your old, bosses, Engineer Maduka, You know, whose house we used to play to when we were kids at Loyola College in Ibadan back in those days. He said to me, that point you are making makes a lot of sense. Why don't you come to my office? I arrive in his office and he calls Mohammed Ibrahim, who was managing director of NTA News back then, and says, Mohammed, put him on TV. And I was on TV talking about those kinds of policies. The next day, I was getting calls from the presidency about those ideas. The next day, I was in government. You know, those kinds of things don't happen these days because it's about who knows who and who knows not who. Meritocracy, you know, which is what has shaped the modern world, is something that we are losing as a society.
Yeah. Okay, now lastly, the current Minister of Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, former governor of Rivers State, has been in the news lately and in a very dramatic way. Can you just, you know, give me your thoughts about the way he has been presented, the way he presents himself, and the way the government is reacting to it?
Tony, I don't want to dignify that conversation. I feel it's tragedy that public officers will carry on in the manner that we are seeing them carry on. We need more civility, more decorum in public life. So please, let's talk about something else.
Okay. Now, before we end up, we have about 3 minutes to go. What's your general advice to the current government, to the people of Nigeria, and then the way the economy is being managed at this rate? How do people cope, and how should leadership handle it?
See, we need a clear national strategy of how to get out of poverty. And that clear national strategy has to look at our factor endowment. What are the things that we are gifted with? How do we ensure that there's enough security to develop those in a systematic way to respond to the most immediate need and the long-term needs for production? Which means, for example, hunger is an issue. What are the legumes that in 90 days are out there, you know, provide enough security to people, to farm, provide farm management support, give everybody, just the way Vietnam did about 15, 20 years ago, and now we're looking at them like, oh my God, look at Vietnam. The same thing can be done here. And then as these outputs come, first of all, they take care of the food security problem. Secondly, they then feed value chains in clusters where industries based on the endowment, whether it's again, sesame seed in North Central, gum arabic in Northwest, hydrocarbons value chain in South-South. You know, these things can be done, but we are too distracted by politics to think development. We must think how we can build a developmental state. Let us leave this politics business to more civil engagement and focus on governing. We are not governing.
Thank you so much, Professor Pat Utomi. That's the end of Soni Irabor Live today with Professor Pat Utomi, who is a political economist and a management expert. Thank you for giving us your time. And yes, the beginning was a bit rough, but of course, I'm happy that we ended it. We went through it well, and we ended it well. Thank you, Prof, and have a good evening. Every one of you who have enjoyed it, thank you also, and good night.